chances when it comes to something like this. And, you know, I hope, like you said, I hope other players listen to what he says, what we say here today. And they do. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is your boy, AJ Tripp. It bothers me, and I know, Bill, obviously, my voice is gone, but we are here to talk about the college football playoff. I'm going to try to talk about it. So we're going to listen to this in a minute. They have, right now, I'm listening to CBS talk about the Kareem Hunt situation. We're going to go to ESPN shortly. Perhaps the most important part of this business incentive is comprehensive orientation and training of folks to understand exactly what Coach passionately described. You know what? It has to be done because your career, and also more importantly, what we do in terms of society. You know how many women across the spectrum, married to husbands or have boyfriends across the spectrum, who are subjected to this kind of aberrant behavior? It needs to be addressed comprehensively by everyone. And the NFL today continues after this.
Geico makes it so easy to manage.
From Atlanta to Athens last night. It is incredibly quiet here at the Dogs practice facility. There will be no watch party, so certainly no duck crepes happening here. There wasn't one last year either, though, if we're being honest, and that was when the Dogs were essentially a lock to be in the college football playoff after winning the SEC championship. They did not win the championship last night. In fact, it was a hard-fought, tough, very close loss that now has people wondering if they deserve a spot in there. Kirby Smart was on our airwaves last night at about 1 o'clock, again, making a case for why the Dogs should be in. Right now, he and his coaches are upstairs in their offices. They're having meetings, looking over film, getting on the recruiting trail, as a lot of teams are want to do at this point. Will this be the year that they are back in the college football playoff and have a chance to go after one of these national titles that you see here on the wall behind me? You know, that 1980 year that you see, that was a matchup against Notre Dame that happened to come in the Sugar Bowl. Why is that apropos? Because you're hearing Sugar Bowl as a possible destination for this Georgia Bulldogs team if, in fact, they are not one of the teams in the college football playoff, Reese.
Jen, Georgia Open Lightning strikes, and they get in for the second consecutive year. Gene Wojciechowski is in Norman, where Oklahoma just won the Big 12 championship. Sooners trying to get in the playoff for the third time in 4 years. Gino, how would you describe Oklahoma's level of confidence that their name will be called?
Well, Reese, greetings from Norman, Oklahoma, where things turn out the way they think they will turn out here with Lincoln Riley and his team. Alabama, Nick Saban, Jalen Hurts, they will never have to worry about buying a dinner in this town ever again. Lincoln Riley is confident, but not overconfident. How did he find out about news of Bama beating Georgia? Well, he was actually in his car with his wife, Caitlin. Caitlin was scrolling through the phone as they were driving back from Oklahoma City to Norman after arriving back from the Big 12 championship. She's the one that saw that Bama had taken that late lead. So again, yes, confident, not overconfident, Reese. And here's the kicker. You guys are going to announce this around, 12:30 Eastern time. Well, Lincoln Riley is scheduled to get on a plane here 11:30 local time and fly down to Dallas for a handful of recruiting visits. So if you guys don't announce it in time, he's getting on that plane, and he won't know if he's in or out until he checks that phone when he lands in Dallas.
Gene sent Lincoln a quick text telling we do not have the rankings in hand yet. Graphics producer Brandon doesn't have them. We're waiting like everyone else. We expect them somewhere around the bottom of the hour. And Air Sooners should have Wi-Fi on there. So Lincoln ought to be able to check out the results once again. Gene Wojciechowski and Norman, he'll be there with Oklahoma's reaction to whatever the news is. Marty Smith joined us now from Columbus. Ohio State, like the Sooners, hoping to get their third playoff berths. The Buckeyes, Marty,
I need to pull up
they had a second loss. This year it's only one loss, but it's still a bit of an albatross because of the magnitude of it. What's their level of confidence?
Reese, the fans certainly not the only people wondering who's going to get in. Urban Meyer asked me multiple times last night, paint the playoff picture for me. Who did what? What is our opportunity? And I said to him, why do you deserve an opportunity? He pointed directly to two things. Number one, conference championship. He puts tremendous weight on the value of winning a conference. He said it time and again last night, said it to me, said it to the assembled media after the game. And then there's the other side. It's the emotional year that they've had here in Columbus, Ohio. It's been tumultuous. It started with controversy. They lose their coach. They get their coach back. They lose to Purdue. Then they beat their arch rival at home, who was the 4th-ranked team in the country at the time and the number 1 ranked defense at the time. And then you manage the emotional aftermath of that win. Urban Meyer told me it was a genuine emotional hangover, and win the Big Ten championship. Again, he puts tremendous weight on that, and he said to me, we might be the best conference in the country. It's going to be interesting to see if they get in. Nobody's here yet at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. There's no watch party, no players, no coaches. We expect them to trickle in as the day progresses here, and when they arrive, we'll get their thoughts on what their fate is, Reese.
And Marty, we will see. I think many might take exception to the idea that they were the best conference in the country, though in the preseason we thought it might be that way, but the Big Ten had a few teams that did not live up to expectations. Here are the pros and cons of the teams that we're talking about and we expect to be the ones considered. And look, UCF deserves all the credit in the world for winning 25 in a row, but I don't think that anyone on our panel, likely not in the room based on what we've seen, think they rise to this level. Georgia has the best strength of schedule, and according to FBI, they're the 3rd best team, but they lost 2 games, including a 3-touchdown loss at LSU. 2 biggest games, lost them both, LSU and Alabama. Oklahoma's beaten everybody on their schedule. You've heard that one a lot after they avenged their loss to Texas, and the loss was close, but their defense has been horrific, to put it kindly, for much of the season. Ohio State's defense has been spotty. There's more upside to the Buckeye defense than there is to Oklahoma, but just like last year, although it was a 2nd loss to Iowa last year, in addition to a loss to Oklahoma that ultimately kept the Buckeyes from getting in, it's still a wide margin of defeat to a team that turned out not to be very good. Among all of those things, what carries the most weight with you?
I think it's the schedule that Georgia played, and I think this committee asking themselves, what would Oklahoma or Ohio State have done had they played that schedule? So Georgia plays number 1, 9, 10, 15, 24. I think there's a good chance Ohio State, Oklahoma would have at least had 2 losses against that schedule. Now, an interesting thing, too, you have to ask then, what would have happened if Oklahoma and Ohio State had gone and played LSU? I think everyone thinks Alabama beats those other 2 teams. Would they have lost? I don't think it's such an obvious answer. Would they have lost by 20 points like Georgia did? I don't think that's so obvious either. But I think the schedule and who you play and what you imagine the outcome to be, I think is very important.
I think what's great about this is you could make a case for all 3, and you could chip away at all 3. I've heard a lot about Ohio State. They struggled against Purdue. Obviously, they struggled against teams like Indiana, Minnesota, and go down the line, Nebraska. But you can say the same thing about Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
You could go all the way back to Army, and you could look at Oklahoma State, and you could look at Kansas, Texas Tech. If Alan Bowman didn't go out, they'd probably lose that game. So that's what I'm saying. That's why this committee's taking all the way up to 12:30 Eastern or longer, because they're weighing all these things, and it's very difficult to separate Team A from B from C.
Yeah, I think when we look at these conferences, and you mentioned the schedule that Georgia had to play, I believe that Oklahoma and the Big 12 and their style of play would look around and say, hey, we can beat these teams because we score points. And everyone has their own style and their own conference. We always have this conversation about the Big 12 not playing defense, how many points they score. And when they play other conferences, they still score that many points. And that's why I look at this Oklahoma team and their offense and the way they put up points, because they've proven no matter who they play, they put up those kind of points. Can those teams, whether it's the schedule that Georgia ran, whether it's the Ohio State schedule, can those teams
Ohio
put up those amounts?
Built like a Big 12 team. With Dwayne
Offensively,
Haskins,
yes.
Dwayne Haskins, with the weapons he has around him, the 2 NFL running backs, the up-tempo attack. Haskins right now executing at a level that very few are. And Kyler Murray and he probably both end up in New York City, and they're scoring a lot of points. That's what makes Ohio State so interesting here and trying to compare them to Oklahoma.
But this is why it's fun, because we only have 5 guys up here right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, make sure I'm math right. We have 5 people. Well, they have 13 people in a room that get to do this. And we can talk about schedules, and we can talk about this. The eye test for all these people are going to be different. And what they see and what they place a premium on is going to be different. Like you talked about offense, and the committee has talked about they're blown away by Kyler Murray. You should be. It's awesome to see.
You're going to be blown away.
It's really fun. And now you can also go look at teams like Georgia and Ohio State. They might make the degree of difficulty week in and week out for offenses like that. With guys in the trenches that they have, they'll make it more difficult for Kyler Murray. They'll get more stops. Can the defenses get stops? This is why it's awesome, and it's so fun. This is why this is the best sport in America, because we get to do this at the end, and then your eyeballs are different than mine, different than yours.
All these discussions, all these different criteria, all these different things. If the coaches in that room, in that room,
5 of them.
if they say, if the committee looks at them and they say, Coach Beamer and everybody else, who would you not want to play? That's where Georgia would make a very strong case.
I'm not so sure about that.
I'm
not
that's
so sure
my
about that. I don't know who wants to see Kyler Murray now.
That's true.
I don't
But everybody wants
I don't care how many steps you have.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. But who wants to see that offense? Because you know you play them, you got to score 40, 50 points. I don't know that the coaches say that.
I know we're
I
splitting.
wouldn't want to play Jake Fromm either, by the way.
I know we're splitting hair on semantics. I can't stand that. If you're going to win a championship, you should want to play everybody. Play them, bring them on. I know it's semantics, and I know what you mean when you say it. We don't have any rankings yet. Play anybody. Bring them on, kids. Bring them on. All right, Chris Fowler joining us now. Chris, we've talked a lot about this issue. We talked about it on Scott Van Pelt's show last night about how to determine what best means in terms of evaluating who gets that last spot, assuming there is only one spot left.
Yeah, what's maddening, Reese, is that sometimes different criteria are applied when it's convenient. If you want to punch holes in Oklahoma's resume and their defense, you can easily do that. Same thing for Ohio State. If you think Georgia would beat them head-to-head, that's fine. But then you don't want to use that argument when you apply it to Notre Dame, because people believe that a 12-0 Irish team are a lot to go in. And yet, as you pointed out, head-to-head on a neutral field, would they really pick Notre Dame to beat Georgia or Ohio State or Oklahoma? You can't go by who Vegas would pick to win, in my opinion. I guess I have to punch holes in Georgia's resume. If I think Oklahoma belongs in, and I do, the results have to matter, and they have to matter a lot. And I know their schedule was tough, but if the best thing you can say about Georgia is that they played Alabama really, really tough, that's not enough for me. They went to Baton Rouge, hard place to win, of course, turned the ball over 4 times, got outgained by a lot, and lost by 20. Bama was in there 129-0. I know Georgia's got elite talent. On the hoof, they look gorgeous. It's a great team. But if you have to make the tough choices, I would just lean to the team that a vengeance-only loss, won its conference. Yes, the defense is horrific, used a good word, but the offense is also historically elite. And there's lots of different ways to win football games, and they almost outscored Georgia last year, didn't get the job done. But I would put the Sooners at 4.
Yeah, so would I, Chris. And I would say that at times the defense has been horrific. They've also made plays. They came up with a safety, came up with a couple of touchdowns in the close win against West Virginia. Fowler's going to be with us a little bit later on. Thanks for being there, hanging out, Fowler. We still don't have the rankings just yet, but we do have Paul Feinbaum joining us right now. So, Paul, in SEC territory, last year 2 SEC teams got in that had not played before. And now, if Georgia's included, you potentially could have a 1-4 rematch in the semifinals. What's your reaction to that potential, and is that the way it should be?
I think that's the way it should be. I don't think that's the way it will be. And I think because there are so many other factors involved and the political aspects of it, this committee or someone on this committee will get to. I had never thought about Georgia getting into the playoff with a lost Alabama until I talked to Kirk Herbstreit on Monday night. And he opened my eyes to it, and he has convinced me, and I think a few others, probably not the committee, that Georgia is not so much deserving, forget that word, but they are among the best teams. And frankly, I respect what Chris said. Georgia has the loss, but come on. We're looking for the best 4 schools in America. Georgia is one of those. We're going to penalize them because they lost to the best team. Well, who else would have lost to Alabama last night? I think pretty much everyone else, perhaps not Clemson, but I think Alabama would have beaten them too. So that's where I land. I think if the committee does put Georgia in, it will open Pandora's box, which I think college football is not ready for. They don't want to have all these conference champions get left out. So in a couple of minutes, I think we're going to see Oklahoma in there, Reese.
And we don't have the rankings yet, Paul. I'll tell you this. There's been no discussion whatsoever among the commissioners or university presidents for expansion. I'm told there is no appetite for it. You want to see some people get hungry? I mean hungry fast. You let Georgia pop up on number 4. There will be university presidents and conference commissioners and ADs who are hungry to expand this thing sooner rather than later because they will perceive that the SEC is getting an unfair advantage. Heather Dinich covers the college football playoff and the selection process as well as anyone who's been following this down in Grapevine, Texas. Heather, we don't have the rankings yet. What's the last day? What's this morning been like for the committee?
Well, I've heard that they met until about 1:30 a.m. Central, and I was told by somebody in the room that they felt really good about where they left with their voting in their top 25 this morning, but that there was still a lot to be discussed. They came back around 7:30 Central, had breakfast, and went right back into the meeting rooms. I think they went right up to the buzzer. I can tell you this, Selection Committee Chair Rob Mullins is waiting to take my seat, so I'm going to get out of the way and let him have it.
All right, Heather Dinich reporting from College Football Playoff headquarters there in Grapevine. Okay, here are the selection committee members. Rob Mullins, the athletic director at Oregon, is the chair. 6 of these folks are new. It's their first year on the committee.
Ronnie Lott. I like that. Ronnie Lott. Old school player.
And I'm told we just got the rankings. Graphics producer Brandon, it's on you. You're the most powerful man in football. Get it done.
There we go. We take at them. Oh, they're going to take a commercial break. Of course, they're going to take a commercial break.
Playoff selection show.
While they at commercial break, let me go ahead and let me say what I want. I've always decided that I felt that UCF, because they're in another conference, in a Power 5 conference, that they get the shaft. I would like to see UCF get it. However, let's be realistic. That's not going to happen. So I would expect Alabama to be 1, Clemson to be 2, Notre Dame to be 3, and Oklahoma to be 4. That's what I'm expecting. What it should be is Ohio State should be 4. Ohio State played better last night than Oklahoma did. I think Ohio State has played better all season than Oklahoma did. But let's face it, guys. This is why we need to go to an 18 playoff or a 16-team playoff, right? I mean, this 4-team stuff, it's good, but, I mean, come on. I mean, and Reese Davis is right. Let Georgia show up somewhere on that screen. Or, God forbid, as a Notre Dame fan, if they put Georgia up there and Oklahoma or Ohio State up there and they take Notre Dame out because of a conference championship, or they don't think that Notre Dame is one of the top 4 teams, let that happen. This needs to be an 8-team and a 16-team playoff. It really does. All right, once again, for those of y'all just joining in, I'm either sick or losing my voice, so that's why this voice is really bad. But I've done this now for 3 straight years. I didn't want to just not do my reaction to the college football playoff. I love football, as you guys know. I love pro and college football. So this, to me, is a part of my YouTube thing. It's always going to be talking about sports and college football and pro football. So I decided to go ahead and go with it. So please excuse my voice. Also, I wanted to start also recording videos for the Christmas, for Christmas, start recording that so that, during my Christmas vacation. I see I'm already starting to lose it. So, you know what? I'm going to hush. So to save my voice for after.
Selection show presented by AT&T. Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State. Who's in?
National Championship Trophy presented by Dr. Pepper. That is the prize for the winner of the college football playoff. This is the 5th year of the 4-year playoff to determine college football's national champion, selected by a 13-member selection committee. This is the criteria used to rank the teams. This is unless you believe a team to be unequivocally better than the teams they're being compared against, conference championships, strength of schedule, head-to-head, outcomes of common opponents without incenting margin of victory, though they should. A 30-point win is better than a 1-point win. It just is. And other relevant factors, which gives them some latitude to exercise some subjectivity, which is a departure from the old BCS days where there was a formula, spit it out, and got the answer. We're going to be on TV for the next hour. No commercial breaks or there in that neighborhood to parse this and talk about it. Really?
Joey didn't know that. Well, considered a bathroom break.
I don't know for the next commercial breaks. Before the next commercial break.
Yeah, because we're going 4 strong.
4 strong today. We have the top 6. We don't have the entire rankings, but we're going to show you the top 6, and here they come.
This will be interesting. The first one will be.
It will be. The rankings presented by AT&T. The number 1 team is Alabama. 5 years to the playoff. The Crimson Tide in for the 5th.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I can't show it. I'm sorry.
Do it back to back. For the 4th straight year, I imagine we're going to see the Clemson Tigers. At number 2.
Yeah, Clemson Tigers.
How many of those pizzas is Dexter Lawrence eating?
He gets 4 pies himself. In 40.
You get 4.
You get, hey,
the Tigers got
2 more games.
Tigers make their 4th straight college football playoff appearance. They won the national championship 2016, and there's Clemson at the pizza party. That is a much more subdued reaction than we got here.
It's not as exciting.
Not only who's going to be 3 and 4, but who this ends up being will dictate where Alabama and where Clemson end up playing in their game.
And by the way, that has not been determined yet. We don't have the answer to that yet. Part of it, the reason for that will probably be told when we see who number 4 is. At the moment, let's see if Notre Dame held 3 without playing yesterday, and they did.
They did.
So, in the first 4 years of the college football playoff, we
Notre Dame, yes.
Of 3 undefeated teams included. None of those teams ever won the national championship. So, unless whoever winds up 4 wins it, we'll have our first undefeated champion in college football.
Notre Dame and Clemson. Notre Dame and Clemson be a great game. Last time they played, it was a great game. Went down to the wire in Death Valley.
Yeah, it was. Notre Dame pushed them hard. Will they be able to do so? Again, we don't know where that national semifinal will be. It will be on December 29th. So it turns out the committee was thinking much like us, at least in terms of 3 teams for 1 spot. Before we reveal those, let's look at the comparison, some of the numbers. I told you, there's the eye test. There's some subjectivity involved here. FPI is more of a Vegas-based, forward-looking power ranking. Who do you think would win the game? In that category, Georgia has the edge. They also have the edge in strength of schedule, but in strength of record, meaning how you fared against your schedule, it is Ohio State ahead of Georgia, followed by Oklahoma. Game control, this measures play-by-play how likely you are to win a game throughout the course of each and every snap you have.
Basically how dominant you
are.
How
dominant you are, and Ohio State is way behind in that category for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, okay. And I think that speaks about some of the games that we talked about prior to Michigan and the Northwest.
Okay, we've got people hanging on the edge of their seats. Who should it be? Who should it
one of them.
Who should it be?
Who should it be? Georgia? I think it'll be Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
I think it'll be Oklahoma.
It should be Georgia. I imagine it's going to be Oklahoma.
So Jesse and I again.
Let's have a look at it right now. The number 14 play Alabama in the national semifinal. In one of the games on December 29th,
Oklahoma.
It will be Kyler Murray and the Big 12 champion Oklahoma Sooners. Now, look, you see, this is a very familiar look. 3 of these teams made the playoff last year. Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma. There have been 20 playoff berths in the playoff era. 12 of them belong to those 3 teams, and I'm just told, and this is what Alabama preferred. They didn't mind playing Oklahoma. Preferred not to play them in a virtual home game in Dallas, so that will be the Orange Bowl game. Tua Tagovailoa, who's supposed to be healthy. Kyler Murray, top 2 guys for the Heisman. Jalen Hurts had a little bit of a star turn, and Oklahoma gets that 4th spot.
Yeah, and I think they deserve that 4th spot, and we'll get a chance to see Kyler Murray and this outstanding offense play against the Alabama team. Can Nick Saban shut down this offense that nobody else has been able to do?
To see Kyler Murray against that D. I got to believe at 5 is going to be Ohio State. I think if Georgia's going to be in, they'd be at 4. But now I'm at Ohio State.
That's
Georgia.
I think you're not a betting man.
And that to me is that's crazy because you think about that means there was clear separation between Oklahoma and Ohio State. Clear. That means it was very
And
clear.
that means it was a Georgia-Oklahoma debate.
And that means it was close to putting in a 2-loss team over a 1-loss conference champion, which means the committee seriously looked at their eyeballs and it mattered a heck of a lot.
Which I have to say, guys, to me is very surprising because you're right. It just feels like throughout the show, the debate really has been, is it Georgia, is it Oklahoma? Just 2 weeks ago, Ohio State put up 62 points against the then number 4 team in the country in Michigan, a team that had won 10 in a row, that had looked dominant in their revenge tour against Wisconsin, Michigan State, pounded Penn State. That was a team that the committee really, really, really respected. They didn't have the same result in the Big Ten title game against Northwestern, but that was a big-time statement for them. I just think it was too much, too late. They were number 10 in the country 2 weeks ago. Oklahoma and Georgia have been 5, 6, 4, and 5 respectively. It was just too much ground for Ohio State.
I think the separation was set up, though, just in what we saw Tuesday, with Oklahoma being number 5 and Ohio State being number 6, and Oklahoma going on to play number 14 Texas, while Ohio State is playing number 21 in Northwestern. So everything to that point, the Michigan win, the Penn State win, the TCU win, was all calculated on Tuesday and put into the ingredients were Oklahoma's a better team. So then the only last point that to be added was a better win by Oklahoma. Georgia sort of jumped in between that, but I don't see there was a path for Ohio State to jump Oklahoma, adding Texas and Ohio State adding Northwestern.
You know, it'll be interesting to see when we talk to Rob Mullins. We're going to be on for about the next hour without commercial interruption, and we'll ask Rob these questions. Remember, this is a little bit different than what we all grew up with 60-some-odd people voting in polls. You only have 13 people. It doesn't take that many people to sway the vote or change minds, so there might not have been this big separation, and they don't necessarily just go 1 versus 1. The way they vote, you're always in groups of 6 whittling down to 3. So they may compare in the discussion, but they're not just saying, are you taking them or them? It doesn't go that way.
I also think a couple weeks ago, if we go back a couple weeks before the Michigan game, you also saw a UCF team jump over Ohio State. And I thought it said a lot about the committee's thoughts about what they thought about Ohio State's inconsistencies. Yes, they were winning, but they had that blowout loss that the committee obviously looks at, they're going to frown upon. It's a bad loss to a decent team. And then you also had played inconsistent. When UCF jumped up, I mean, I think you kind of knew right there that Ohio State, the committee, the way they thought about Ohio State, it was well behind those other teams that were in front.
I guess I'm still caught up in the Oklahoma and Georgia discussion, not so much Ohio State. Ohio State, as you guys all said, they had a long way to climb despite those solid victories against Michigan and Northwestern. I think the committee has said that 2 losses is too much for Georgia to overcome. Not being a conference champion is too much to overcome. So this is a historical moment as far as evaluating the committee and moving forward, because the eyeball test, to me, clearly Georgia is a top 4 team. 3 of the 4 or 5 people up here, and maybe Reese, you even think Georgia,
I do.
On the eyeball test, you think Georgia's a better team. But the 2 losses and not being a conference champion is the only reason we're going to keep Georgia out. Right?
It's the 2 losses and the fact that there's no big win to offset them.
I understand that.
That's the thing I think
but their strength of schedule
understood
better than anybody.
But at some point you have to go with what is instead of what might have happened. And somebody else would have to play at Alabama or LSU.
And if we're truly saying, let's just find the 4 best teams, regardless of record, regardless of how they looked in their last game where they won or lost, then I do believe that Notre Dame has to be in that conversation on who is the 4 best teams. And besides what Vegas said, where Notre Dame would be an underdog, whether it's Ohio State, Oklahoma, or Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, separated. Everyone else, if we're not worried about wins and losses, we're not worried about the 2 losses, not worried about the 0 at the end of Notre Dame, they need to be in a conversation. We're trying to find the 4 best teams, because if that is the case, then I don't believe Notre Dame deserves it.
That's the one thing I've wondered about you. You've been adamant that your eyeballs tell you that Georgia is one of the 4 best.
Right.
Yet you had Notre Dame in, and I don't think your eyeballs tell you that about the Irish.
They don't. Notre Dame would be in that mix with Ohio State and Oklahoma. You and I were talking about this before. I don't think Notre Dame necessarily plays a system and a style that's conducive to being able to blow people out and impress you and say, man, Notre Dame's definitely better than this team or that team. They play great football on both sides of the ball. They're very efficient. They play complementary. It's like a team from the 80s or 90s. So it's hard for you to look at them and put their offense on the same table with Oklahoma.
Are you picking them, would you pick them to beat Oklahoma, Ohio State, Georgia?
Neutral
Georgia field. Would you pick Notre Dame? Because
Probably not.
and that's what I'm talking about when I look at this. And They're a great team, and you're right. You watch them; they are solid, and they're not going to let a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. And the way they play the game, and watching the USC game, and watching it again, going back and just studying the tape. USC was presenting an issue for Notre Dame. Great coaching by Brian Kelly, what he did, the adjustments they made offensively in the second half. But USC and their speed, their athleticism was presenting a problem for Notre Dame. The same problem that Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia would present for Notre Dame. And that's why I say, if we're just talking 4 best teams, Notre Dame has to be in that discussion.
I think one of the big reasons Oklahoma gets in, I think one thing the committee's showing us too, Oklahoma's beaten everybody on their schedule now. And getting that rematch against Texas, who they lost to by 3 points early in the year, getting a chance to get them back, they can now say, we've beaten everybody that we played this year, just like Alabama did, just like Clemson did, and just like Notre Dame did, which is, I think, the biggest reason why Notre Dame.
With that being said, then remember this moving forward. They struggled against Army. They struggled against Kansas. They struggled against Texas Tech. Oklahoma State. But they won. So maybe for this committee, it doesn't matter when you play inferior teams and win. You find a way to win 60-55 as long as you win.
I think you could ask any coach in college football, and we all know this, they tell you how hard it is to get a win.
Absolutely.
Every single Saturday with 18 to 20.
No matter who you're playing.
It's very difficult.
For y'all with Notre Dame, real quick, like, I understand what you're saying about Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame, they lack the elite upper echelon playmakers or players. But I'll say this: when you start to poke holes, there's not holes to poke at. You go to Oklahoma, you got severe holes to poke at. So I think when you look at Clemson, Alabama, and Notre Dame, I think there's less holes to poke arguments. They're solid everywhere across the board. That's what I think. When you start discussing, I think it needs to be brought up about Notre Dame that they've been consistent, they've won all their games, and there isn't a glaring weakness in their game that you look at and say that they're really deficient, really bad.
If you're just going to go on what's happened during the season, this would be a great year for the BCS.
2 teams.
2 teams.
Yeah.
There are 2 teams who separate.
Yeah.
You know, and
the Roy bus.
The rest of y'all. Yeah, that's right. There's Alabama, Clemson, the rest of y'all. Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that they can't lose. For Oklahoma with that offense, you're capable of beating anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with that defense, they've shown they're capable of losing.
That is true.
Alabama playing 60 to 50 games.
There were 2 times
before.
There were 2 times before when we got to this point where I kind of looked at the 4 teams that got in and kind of thought one of the teams really had no shot. In 2015, Michigan State, I didn't think they had a shot against Bama. And the next year, Washington against Bama, I didn't think they have a shot. I think with these 4 teams, I think they can all win their semifinal matchup. I do, including Oklahoma because of Kyler Murray and that historic offense.
Yeah, you know, Oklahoma's only the 2nd team in the playoff era not to finish in the top 4 of the playoff prediction, of the strength of record, I should say. They finished 6th in there. So we're going to have the second one. The first one was Ohio State in 2014. It was the 4th seed who beat Alabama, number 1, and went on to win the national championship. A little historical perspective. Rob Mullins, who is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, joins us now. Rob spent a lot of time since last night talking about who would get that final spot among the teams that aren't undefeated in the Power 5. How would you describe the discussions as it pertained to Oklahoma and what gave them the edge over Georgia and Ohio State?
Well, we spent considerable time on it, as you might expect. And in the end, you know, 1-loss conference champion with their only loss being in a neutral field, close loss to a ranked team, which they avenged in their conference championship. As we talked about the last several weeks, obviously, dynamic offense. And, you know, their defense has made some big plays in the last couple of weeks.
We've had a robust discussion. I asked you this last week, and candidly, you dodged it a little bit. How do you define best? How narrow is that definition? And how much of it is based in the room on who you think would win the game if these 2 teams play? Because Vegas thinks it, we think it. A lot of us would pick Georgia to win these games head-to-head. How is that discussion handled?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of discussion. And as you might expect in the room, we're looking at full body of work. We understand the charges to get the 4 best teams. And when you're looking at all that, every bit of that matters. Eye test, data, all of that gets discussed. And I can assure you that every combination was discussed in the room. There was at least one member on every one of these combinations for 4, 5, and 6 that was represented a case for each of those teams to be 4. There was strong debate. There was even division in the room. And you know, we went early into the morning and got back at it again after a couple hours of sleep.
So how did Georgia then wind up between these 2 1-loss conference champions?
Well, just as I said, every combination was vetted, looking at their full body of work, their resume side by side. In the end, what we decided was amongst the group of three, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Ohio State, that the committee voted that it was not, no one was unequivocally better than the other. So then we leaned on the protocol. And as we leaned on the protocol, and you know what those are, we're looking at head-to-heads, conference champions, strength of schedule, and results against common opponents. The vote came out that Oklahoma was 4, Georgia was 5, and Ohio State was 6.
Okay, so you look at with Georgia now. They're the one that didn't have a conference champion, but they did have the strongest strength of schedule, at least according to the metrics that I've looked at. Does that indicate that strength of schedule can trump conference championships?
Well, we look at all of them. And in this instance, the conference champion, when one team wasn't unequivocally better than the other, we went to the protocol. And then on this one, the one-loss conference champion carried the day.
And Rob, we've talked a little bit about Notre Dame too. Was Notre Dame close to moving down? Were they unequivocally among the top 3?
There was a discussion relative to all of the top 6, but absolutely Notre Dame was discussed in that 3, 4, 5 range as well. And the committee felt that they deserved, with their 12-0 record, their body of work, wins over Michigan, wins over Northwestern, win over Syracuse, balanced team, that they deserve that number 3 ranking.
All right, Rob Mullins joining us. Rob, thank you for your time all season. Look forward to seeing you during the college football playoff, and appreciate you answering these questions for which often there are no concrete answers.
Exactly.
Rob's going to join us a little bit later on. Rob Mullins, who is a gentleman and the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Chris Fowler rejoins us now. So, Chris, you and I have discussed this. We both anticipated and thought it should be Oklahoma. What was your reaction to the decision? What Rob had to say about it?
Well, Reese, I thought the answers to your questions were interesting because no matter what he says, the explanations are going to be flawed in the minds of people who support Georgia and Ohio State. Interesting that Georgia landed between 2 conference champions. I agree that it was a close call. I agree they would have fallen in that same cluster. You're splitting hairs, and they went with the team that won a conference championship, not the team that maybe the football people in the room thought would win head-to-head. So the status quo in terms of no 2-loss teams getting in has been maintained. I think Kirk's point is a good one. Maybe we'll get the breakthrough. Did politics play a role in the era we live in? Many millions of people will be convinced that politics did play a part, that they didn't want to put 2 SEC teams in this bracket again and deny 3 power conference champions a place in that bracket. So I'm satisfied with the 4. Looking forward to the matchups. Certainly have a couple questions. I think Saban reassured people that Tagovailoa's injury is not serious, the ankle injury, the latest of his injuries, because he hasn't really been healthy all season. My question on Oklahoma's side would be, Marquise Hollywood Brown looked to have a foot injury that he was distraught about, in tears, in a boot after the game, being consoled by the school president. I know you guys will chew on the matchups coming up, but I wonder if that played a part, because without their best receiver, that offense isn't quite as elite as it has been. I certainly hope that given 4 weeks, he can get healthy, but you doubt if it's a broken foot that he's going to be ready, and that could be a key part of that matchup.
Not definitive, Chris. There have been indications this morning from Norman that we received that they do expect Hollywood Brown to be ready for the playoff. Now, we're always, if true, we're always cynical this time of year, and you don't want to give the committee any little extra thing. So we'll see. But the indications were that was the case. Chris Fowler joining us from South Beach, as we now know who will play in the college football playoff. Clemson is going for the 4th.
All right, so we've heard it, we've seen the thing. We now know who the college football playoff teams are. My opinions are, I thought Ohio State was the better team yesterday and kind of all season possibly. That being said, though, I have no problem with Oklahoma being in there. Oklahoma was 5 Tuesday. It would make sense that when Georgia loses, they would be 4. Once again, you kind of feel bad for UCF. Not even having a chance at the playoff, and it's unfortunate for them. And as a Notre Dame fan, I'm glad that they stayed at the. Not only am I glad that they stayed in the playoff, I'm glad that they stayed at 3 because I think they got a real good shot at beating Clemson. And then hopefully you'll let Oklahoma take out Alabama, and then then you can take on Oklahoma in the national championship game. And so hopefully that happens. But yeah, it was good, and I think this was a great time for college football. So it's gonna be a fun month. We got the Army Navy game is this Saturday, and then after that, I think the bowl games will start, and the bowl games will start throughout the entire year. So make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. I will be talking about the national championship game and the entire college football season once the national championship game is over in January. You better believe that. And hopefully my voice will be a lot better than it is right now. Once again, I apologize for my voice being like this. I'm glad you guys. I'm thankful for those who have stayed with me with my voice. I appreciate it. Post your comments down below. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me what you guys thought about the Final Four. Who you guys think should have been? And did you think it should have been Georgia? Should it have been Ohio State? Shouldn't it have been UCF? Damn. All right, I gotta go take care of this throat. As always, y'all, be good to each other. Be careful out there. I am out.